Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy, the Insane Gang Freak. Yeah. Back at it again with another video. So, Pokemon has been going on for decades now, and there's been a lot of discourse and conversation and some pretty overall justified anger and distrust of the modern games and their lack of quality, and whether or not Game Freak as a studio is even capable of making quality material for them anymore. But I wanted to give my own 2 cents because a lot of the discourse I have seen is fucking stupid. It's either not properly representing what Pokemon is, and it's going off of the conversation what people want Pokemon to be versus what it actually should be. But at the end of the day, it's all opinion, so technically I could easily be wrong as well. This is just what I would personally prefer, but there's some overlap between the fans, so you know, maybe we'll meet some common ground, as it were. But with that being said, we're going to get into it. In this video, as I said, we'll be covering all the issues. So let's start at the very beginning. Pokemon, the first games we got were in 1996. And ever since then, we've been on a kind of a schedule of how long a generation usually lasts. Ironically enough, I used to think that the issue of like 3 years for a generation was a modern problem. If you go back and look, it really isn't. It's been kind of a thing for the most part throughout the entirety of the series. There's only like a small section of time in which games bled into 4-year development time, which I believe is the transition from Gen 3 to Gen 4 and Gen 4 to Gen 5. Those were 4 years. But every other generation, it was like 96 to 99, 99 to 2002, 2002 to 2005, and then, well, that one I think went to 2006, and then 2006 to like 2009 or 10. I think it was 2010. That was also around the time where games were being like put out at different times. Like America would get their games later, so Japan would usually have their games like either somewhere between like 6 months to a year before the original games. And I think the 3-year time gap for the console and the hardware they were working on was perfectly fine. That's my DoorDash notifying me. I wanted to check. At the time, I think that was perfectly fine to have a 3-year window because you were working on the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, DS. Like, none of these, the jumps were there, obviously, but it was nothing crazy. Heck, and when it came to the DS had 2 generations on it, which was Gen 4 and Gen 5. So it wasn't like you needed this crazy long development time to make a quality product. I think part of the reason why Gen 5 turned out as good as it did is literally because it was on the same console as Diamond and Pearl. So all the issues you had in DP were pretty much fixed by the time Gen 5 Black and White came out, which is maybe part of the reason why that game is so great. But as we got into the 3D era with Generation 6, I think there was a noticeable talk and realization that the quality has inherently went down. And as a result, a lot of anger. But I also don't think it was just the console jumping that really hurt it. I think it was also a combination of standards and trying to keep the game fresh and appealing to young and older players. And it became, and then listening to the fans. I mean, you can see evidence of this back in like Gen 3 and Gen 5, where people were having issues in terms of what they wanted from a Pokemon game. And as time has gone on, standards have been raised. Like, you're no longer being held to the standards of a handheld because now you're on a home console. And you're out here struggling with just graphical fidelity, right? And I think that's where the conversation has started, but I also feel like it's been stilted. So as we go through this, I want to properly address those complaints where I think people are misunderstanding what Pokemon always is. Because, of course, with any franchise that goes over 20 years, stagnation is bound to occur. And that means studios have to get creative about how making a game more interesting. The question is, have they been making the right steps to keep Pokemon interesting? So let's figure that out together. Let's talk about Pokemon level design now. Fun thing. Oh, here's a fun thing you can do. This is how you know you're dealing with a casual Pokemon fan. Watch this. When I said Pokemon level design and the people around you scoffed and went, Pokemon doesn't have level design. You're a casual. You're a filthy casual. You're probably over there with your Pikachu plush or some other Gen 1 Pokemon because that was the last generation you actually played until recently. You're wrong. Get out. So Pokemon level design, for those who don't really know what I mean when I say that, is pretty much how you traverse and get around the world, which unfortunately also means we have to talk about the HM system. So the HM system, back in the day, in my opinion, was used as a cool combination. Like, we had to get around the world, but it allowed you to have these cool interactions, and your Pokemon would help you traverse the land. Things like Cut, Strength, Flash, Rock Smash, Surf, Waterfall, Dive, Defall. Spoiler, no one likes Defall. To be fair, no one likes Rock Climb either, but that's a whole other issue. The point is, these are things that helped you traverse the world, and in most cases got you into secrets. It was these cool, like, the barrel would help me climb a wall so I could get to this portion to then be able to traverse the area, because the area isn't just straight up made for humans. With all these Pokemon around, the landscape is hard and difficult and it's rough terrain. And it was cool. You needed a Pokemon like a Machoke with strength to push these big ass boulders out the way because we wanted to get through the next area. And to me, the role playing aspect of that was super cool. Your Pokemon were literally helping you traverse the land to continue your journey. It was a cool concept. And then time passed. And the land changed. And things got annoying because they realized you were intentionally hampering your gaming experience to traverse the world. But that was kind of the trade-off, right? You had 6 Pokemon on the team, right? You know you had to go around and fight gym badges and fight the evil teams and whatnot. But you also needed a way to get through these areas that had these huge bodies of water, had these trees every fucking where, right? And you had these big boulders you had to move. So the HMs were a way to include your Pokemon except for the fact that they were permanent. And I think they did this intentionally because if you didn't make them permanent, you could easily soft lock yourself in certain situations. Imagine being in an area where you need strength, having strength, and then immediately going, shit, I just replaced it with a TM. Now, granted, if you made those particular TMs infinite like they are, then it wouldn't have been an issue either way. But for whatever reason, Game Freak decided we're going to make them permanent because we don't trust that some of y'all are going to do something stupid and soft lock yourself in certain situations. And like I said, it was a cool way of traversing the world, and it felt immersive. But then it got to the point where it felt like certain mons were absolutely being hampered by the TMs and the HMs, specifically the HMs. I think the problem arose probably in specifically Gens 3 and 4, which was the whole, let's give you a ridiculous amount of HMs to the point where you not only need 1 HM slave, you need 2. Because in Gen freaking 3, you needed 1 Mon that could do all the water HMs. Because it wasn't like there wasn't like 4 of them going around, right? Dive, Waterfall, Surf. I think in Gen 2 you had Whirlpool. And it was just kind of like, this is getting kind of be too much. And then Gen 4 said, nah, I got you, buddy. Defog, Rock Climb. And you're just like, why? Why? And the problem is not all these moves were good in battle. Like Surf and Strength, pretty solid moves. Cut after early game, cut is pretty worthless. And then you had things like Flash and Rock Smash, which were pretty trash, okay? And so as time went on and we had these things, it got worse. On top of the fact that areas got more linear because they were like, how do we fix this problem? Gen 3 and 4 were very much the pinnacle of, this is too much side stuff. It's impeding my progress. And I don't want to have 2 Pokemon relegated to HM slaves. That's why everyone had a Bibarel on their team in Diamond and Pearl. Not because you like Bibarel, because a lot of people don't like the Bibarel. But Bibarel learned a bunch of moves, and you didn't have to really worry about it too much. Then all of a sudden, your team of 6 turned into a team of 4, though. And people were like, what the fuck? And so Game Freak said, okay, we have got to stop making this as mandatory as it is. Because the immersion is cool, but now people are getting mad because their gaming experience is being hampered. So what did they decide to do? Starting with Gen 5, a lot of that stuff became optional. You could pretty much traverse the whole land and barely use an HM if at all. That's how Gen 5 handled it. Now, they still had areas in which HMs were needed. They just weren't mandatory. But we also got into a more linear level design. Like, the one thing that's kind of cool about Gen 4, is the whole Mount Coronet, that you were going up and down a mountain in different ways to get to certain parts of the game. It's held back because they didn't know how to design the mountain correctly, and they intentionally have you take the wrong path in certain situations so you wouldn't beat the game too quickly, I guess. But the concept by itself was cool. Then we got to Gen 5, or even in Gen 3, where you could cross certain lakes and rivers and shortcut your way back into older areas. Especially when you had to backtrack to fight Norman, because Norman's the 5th gym, but he's like the first gym town you're actually in. But then it's like, oh no, we'll create this, this lake that's right here. When you get a Pokemon that gets served, then you can just cross the lake and boom, you're now back over there, right? That was cool exploration stuff that we got. And then as time went on, it's like, well, we can't have HM areas anymore because players are annoyed by them, okay? And that means that the world has to be more linear, so we don't need HM stuff, okay? But you're going to at least relegate it to side stuff, right? Yeah, of course. And that's what Gen 5 did. And then we got to Gen 6, where all that kind of got thrown out the window. Then it turned into this whole, well, I guess what I'm going to do is just make these really small sections, or just give you a Pokemon that already knows the move. Hi, Lapras. How are you? Thank you for getting me across the land instead of me having to actually, work for it. Of course. Then you got Alola, which created Ride Pokemon, in which you didn't need HMs at all. They don't exist anymore. And now we just got this, well, look, I'm going to get on a Rhyhorn. I'm going to get on a Sharpedo. I'm going to fly on a Charizard. And none of these Pokemon are mine. So if we now taken the personal experience out of the equation, and now I'm just using some random rental Pokemon to get the job done. And I'm just like, now I just feel disconnected from the experience. And then we get to Gen 8 and 9 where it's not even relevant anymore. But here's the problem with those two gens. I'm just going in a straight path. It's like, oh, look at the curve though. Look at the curve. Oh, the curve. Oh, another curve. But am I still walking straight? Yeah. Now we have no area. But Terrell, in Generation 9, you can climb the walls and you can go anywhere and you can fly. Now traversal's just boring, you idiots. Actually, the Gen 9 was just like, let's just make your legendary learn more traversal skills. Okay, I guess. But now the worlds are empty. Then in Gen 9 also changed the whole battling other trainers thing. So you're not even stopped. You can't even be bothered to really stop. The only thing that makes you stop is a casual wild Pokemon that catches your eye because either it's a new one you've never seen before or it's a mine that you wanted on your team, right? I miss my traversal. I miss the HM concept. Obviously, it needed to change, but what we ended up getting was a super linear games that have no interesting crevices or interesting holes. And that was a problem that Gen 8 very much exemplified. Here's a straight path. Here's a little divot that's like 2 feet off on the left, and you see a Pokeball. You grab the Pokeball, then you keep walking. Oh, look, there's an NPC. What does he have to say? Wow, you found that amazing secret. It was so well hidden. What do you mean it was hidden? It was literally right over there. You tell me you couldn't see 5 feet right? And it wasn't until the DLC for Sword and Shield we got a decent looking area. Oh, look at that elevation. Holy shit. People want to talk about the issue with Sword and Shield so much. Sword and Shield's biggest problem is they didn't understand how open world works. And I technically would argue Scarlet and Violet only gets it better in terms of design. We still don't do anything. That's the problem. Sword and Shield said, here's the wild area. Well, this is a mostly flat land that just has different elemental areas. Is there anything cool here? Dynamax spots. Pokemon. Is that it? Yeah. Oh, the daycare center, which is where you'll be mainly using to run back and forth on your bike to hatch your eggs. That's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh my God, we have got to do better. And it wasn't until the second half of the DLC where we got, hey, look, caves. Hey, look, crevices. Hey, look, changing elevation and secret tunnels and shit. What's in the tunnels? Pokemon. A couple items. Is that it? Yeah. Yeah, that's it. What it feels like is almost as you made the game easier, you didn't change anything else around it. So now the game is just easier with a different coat of paint on it. Because now I don't get confused running into areas that I don't know where I am, as if I didn't already have a map on me. Now it's just turned into straight line. Whoa! Slight fork in the road that ultimately closes right back around. Look at the level design. That's crazy. And it became the worst thing as an experience. I felt like I was just traversing I was just walking a path and nothing interesting was happening, which is why people wanted an open world game, right? In the open world game, all that happened is once you maxed out, you just climbed to the tallest area and you flew over everything. Yeah, that's super interesting. The other thing to me that almost immediately ties in also when it comes to the level design, it was the quality of life changes. Obviously, as an RPG, there are some things that are intrinsically dated and create situations where you're like, I don't want to do this. This isn't fun. So then we fix the game to where those things aren't a problem anymore. The problem that came with these changes, at least for Pokemon, is that nothing else around it changed, which is not how this works, Game Freak. I'll give you an example. Let's talk the most obvious one. Let's talk about experience share. Because to me, HMs and TMs also are in that boat, which is why I think this transitioned so well to begin with. Because HM and TMs were stilted. You got one HM of any given type, except for the few you could buy in stores. And even in there, you could only buy some of those once. And then HMs were forever, but they were also permanent, which was just like, oh my God, no. And then as I said, as we changed level design, HMs had to essentially just go away or turn into ride Pokemon, or your Pikachu and Eevee could do everything, right? That's how that changed. But then we get over here to the TM side and they become infinite depending on the game you're playing, because Game Freak couldn't make up their mind. Because they went from being infinite to now being what they are, crafting stuff. Go get some fur from Meowth and you can make Scratch. Like, which by itself isn't a bad thing, but let me get back to the experience share before I go off on a tangent, right? So experience share back in the day started off like this. You grab the item, you give it to one Pokemon, and that one Pokemon would always get experience even if it wasn't in fights. And there was a way to bring up a Pokemon that you got low leveled and you wanted to put it back at the same par as the rest of the team, or maybe get it high enough to where it would evolve and become strong enough to where it could fight on its own. It was a cool way of catching up. And then other games start coming out and you start realizing, man, I don't need this for just one Pokemon. But you only get one experience share unless you freaking Game Shark that bitch and add in like 16 of them. In which one you would just Game Shark rare candies and they would just go to level 99. Let's just be real about it. So as time went on, it became well, you know what? Why don't we just make it a party thing where the whole party is affected by experience share? But then you have level creep and then the game becomes brain dead, right? Okay, well, let's have it flip off and on. Yeah, but then new players may not realize to cut it back on and make the game harder for themselves. So let's just make it permanent. Okay, fine. Party-wide level increases make sense because almost every other RPG does that anyway, right? You don't play a Final Fantasy game and only level up the one person, right? You need to level up your whole team. So I can understand group experience, right? But you realize then the game has to get harder to justify the level creep, right? Right? And so now I'm absurdly stronger than the enemies. You also created this stupid affection mechanic, which was a cool idea, but also broken, which then made the game even easier. For those who don't know what the affection mechanic is, in later games, pretty much the modern ones, you could love and pamper and treat your Pokemon. And I get it. It was a Pokemon trainer connection, and it was beautiful. But at a certain point, it started giving Pokemon abilities that doesn't make any sense. Your Pokemon could be frozen, poisoned, paralyzed, asleep, and because you love them so much, they will wake up out of that thing instantly or within a turn, which, takes away the point of the awakening potion or super potions or poison berries. Like, you've now made mechanics useless because I love my Minccino so much. And I'm just like, it's one of those anime to game connection things, because you've seen in anime Pokemon do ridiculous things that they wouldn't normally be able to do in the games because of anime logic. And every once in a while, that was like a once per 50 matches kind of thing, like something that barely showed up, but showed up very, very occasionally. And I mean super occasionally, it wouldn't be a problem. Or something that I could cut off as a feature so it wouldn't affect my actual gaming experience to where certain fights become a joke because my Pokemon love me so much, I could break out of being paralyzed. The problem with it is, it makes the game absurdly easy. So your starter, the Mon you have the majority throughout the journey, will probably automatically be on this kind of level, which means you can get into Elite Four fights and your Cinderace would break out of almost anything. Your Cinderace could survive hits because it loves you so much. These are cool mechanics, but once you max out that whole affection, it happens all the time. Your Pokemon is borderline immortal. And once again, these things wouldn't be the worst if either A, they weren't forced upon you and you could just turn them off, or B, the rest of the game matched that energy. The problem is AI for freaking NPC trainers that you, by the way, don't even have to fight anymore, right? Their AI is just as dumb, if not dumber in some cases, than they were back in 1999. And I'm sitting here in the back going, look at all these cool advancements, right? My legendary can fly and jump and climb and do all this cool stuff, so I don't need HMs anymore. My TMs are infinite because either I can craft them or you're just giving me an unlimited amount of TMs that I can get from raids or battles, right? Cool. I don't even have to worry about the grinding as much because my whole team gets experience always. Cool. My Pokemon have an affection mechanic, so if I love them enough, they can cheat out a bunch of different status effects and survive certain hits. Cool. And then you sit there and look and go, well, that means my Focus Sash is irrelevant. All my elemental curing potions are irrelevant. It means I have no use for any of this. Oh, it also means that I'm absurdly powerful. So experience, I don't need to use rare candies or experience candies much unless I'm just on some competitive nonsense. All these different features that were in the original games that are still available are no longer relevant, but they're still in the game. Let me go fight a gym leader real quick. Let's take the first gym leader or the second gym leader in Scarlet and Violet. Oh, wow. This gym leader uses a bunch of grass types. Well, I chose the fire starter. I'm out here burning all these trees, right? Cool, whatever. Then I turn over and go, oh, that's right, terrestrialization. He's about to throw out a Sudowoodo. Sudowoodo is dangerous as fuck because it's a rock type and can absolutely destroy my fire type. Oh, wait, because we have to throw in the stupid gimmick that means this thing now turns into a grass type, and that the fact that I'm probably over level for this stupid gym because we don't have over leveling, we don't have level scaling, means that all of a sudden I'm killing everything. So my gym leaders are stupid. Their gimmicks make them really predictable. I'm over leveled and there's no level scaling to keep me in check, and there's no real punishment for overloving my Pokemon too much. I'm coming out the gate killing everything. What's fun about that? You know, the one thing that has always been relevant in Pokemon games, and especially the anime, overcoming adversity. And for someone who wants to make the anime and game experience start smushing more and more and more together, do you realize what adversity can I go through when everything's a cheese, easy, peasy cake? I literally lose nothing from using any of these features other than a game that's interesting to go through. Spoiler, this has been a problem since X and Y. Why? Because you gave me that stupid Mega Evolution gimmick that allowed me to cheat all these battles. Because all I'm doing, you even gave me a Pokemon to get the Mega Evolution Stone with immediately. So as soon as I got Lucario around the third gym, I'm just one-shotting everything. It's not like Lucario wasn't already known to be an extremely powerful Pokemon, right? Right? It's not like Mega Evolution makes him even stronger, right? Right? It's not like you can literally almost one-shot them. Oh, and what's the next couple of gyms after Karina, right? Let's think about it. Ramos, joke. Was it Valerie and Olympia, both jokes? Like, at a certain point, I'm just like, why am I here? I'm just hitting the A button and holding straight. Just holding straight. And people wonder why the interest from older players went down. All they have now is competitive. Because the main game is just this. Fucking this. And hell, it's frustrating because it's like you make the right moves making certain things easier, but you didn't change nothing else. I got these straight paths. I have a Pokemon that auto climbs walls and shit, bro. What am I doing? And there's no level scaling, so I don't even really need to train like that. Kill some wild Pokemon. I could probably go through a gym in some cases and get enough XP to fight the gym leader. It's the game, and what's crazy is that it actively discourages from exploring. Because if I wanted to go through Scarlet and Violet and explore the whole area, guess what? Guess what? I become over leveled, and now the game becomes even more of a joke than it was before. Hell, it's getting to the point where type advantages don't matter, bro. Why am I even worrying about type advantages? Because I'm probably 30 levels higher anyway, and I can one-shot everything. There's a difference between modernizing and babyfying. And unfortunately they did both when you really should have just did one. That's my overarching point. My fucking God. The depression is literally killing me. I'm dying from depression, y'all. Because this franchise I've been playing for decades is struggling. And the fan base's concern seems to be other things. Why? We wanted a Breath of the Wild experience. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You thought you did. You didn't want that. So let's talk about what I believe to be Game Freak's least and also probably one of their more annoying missteps, which starts where it always has started, in the world of Pokemon. Pokemon have been the biggest aspect of the games pretty much since the beginning. And I think as our jump into 3D, we decided, okay, we need to make the game more bombastic. It needs to be more of a spectacle. And so starting in Generation 6, we got things like Mega Evolution. Now, Mega Evolution started a trend, which is that every generation after had to do some gimmick that affected either a lot or the majority of Pokemon. But I think the better thing that came out of Mega Evolution, and the thing that they've stuck with that I do genuinely appreciate, is regional variants. Things like Alola forms, Paldean forms, Galarian forms, Hisuian forms. Things that make old Pokemon become new again. Regains interest, or even for those fans who like those old Pokemon but didn't get a lot of love in previous generations, those Pokemon were allowed to shine again in new and interesting ways. And I think genuinely that has been a great improvement for the series and overall pro for the series. Whereas I think the gimmicks we've gotten, things like Mega Evolution, Z moves, Dynamaxing, and Terrestrialization, I don't think really do anything for Pokemon whatsoever, because it's a very in and then we're out. In for 3 years, out. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to be excited about here? It's literally just the same. It's just a gimmick that exists for that particular generation. Is irrelevant. And the problem is in older generations, we were building upon each other. I mean, we lost a couple of things, but for the most part, Pokemon was slowly building upon itself. My problem with these things is not only does it make the generations, okay, fine, they're more unique, but it also means even if I like the gimmick, it doesn't matter because the gimmick is gone. So I have no reason to invest in these gimmicks because none of these gimmicks stick around. We don't have Mega Evolution anymore. We don't have Z moves anymore. We don't even have Dynamaxing anymore, even though that's only been a couple years ago. So Terrestrialization will go the same way. It's relevant for another year or two. Boom, new generation, now it doesn't matter. And that's just not fun. That's not a fun concept. On top of which, it makes gyms painfully, and I do mean painfully, uninteresting. And it ain't like gyms where already didn't have problems by themselves before. So you know what doesn't help? Adding more mediocrity to a mediocre situation to begin with. Jesus Christ. But on the plus side, another boon for the series that I think I like, especially in the recent games like Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, is the interesting take we've taken on what Pokemon show up where. What I specifically mean when I say things like this is that for a long time, you could only catch certain Pokemon or certain forms of Pokemon in the wild, which I always thought was kind of ridiculous because there are certain Pokemon that have like cool evolution methods that we just never get to see. Like, oh, how did you find out about Gengar's trade evolution? How did you find out about Inkay's evolution? And so what the recent games did is they added things like you can now catch fully evolved Mons in the wild. Now, some of you don't realize this, but Gengar was never fully catchable in the wild until Sword and Shield, which is ridiculous for a Gen 1 Mon. But they never did that. You can now catch babies in the wild, which was something also you couldn't do. Remember, most baby Mons, you had to breed out to get a baby Mon. Now you can catch a Smoochum. Now you can catch an Elekid. You can catch babies in the wild, which I always thought was cool. I love that variety. I even like some of the things they've done with like Scarlet and Violet, where like you'll have the fully evolved Mon and then a bunch of middle or baby evolutions around it. The whole like mother and pack thing. I think that thing helps to build the world and makes things feel more fleshed out. But once again, that's it. Every time we get a boom, then it also turns into, well, we got a bunch of gimmicks that don't matter for a whole generation. It's great. The other thing that I think isn't really mentioned enough is the Pokédex thing. So the Pokédex thing, I have more of a controversial opinion on, which is that I don't mind that the dex isn't fully in one game. It to me seems unrealistic that we want all this cool lore and like expansion of Pokemon, but for some reason think that every Pokemon in every generation would show up in every region. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But people made such a big deal out of the Pokédex and how you couldn't catch every single Mon in one generation. But to me, it allowed those Mons who were in those generations to stick out. Now, does Game Freak pick favorites? Absolutely. Is that a problem? Absolutely. But if you're asking me, am I mad that the whole dex, the whole 800 to 1,000 Mons isn't in one generation every year? No, I don't care. I like it, actually, because it also forces me to change up who I play with. On top of which, you know, we have new Pokemon, right? This is a problem I think the fandom has had since like Black and White. Remember, and to be fair, Hoenn probably had the first variation of this problem, which is the issue of, hey, look, new generation, the only Mons you get in the main game are the new generation Mons. And people whined about that. You whined without being able to pick a Pikachu in Gen 3 and 5. Where's my Infernape in Generation 5? Well, why can't I get my Butterfree in Gen 6, right? These are the things y'all did. And Game Freak, I think, took the wrong lesson, which is that you were right. Spoiler, you weren't. It was a terrible idea, and they listened to you, which is why Black and White 2, in my opinion, has a less interesting roster, because all they did was just slam all the other Mons from the older games into it. And what happens when they do these things? You have less interest to play as new Pokemon in a new Pokemon game, and you just go back to your old favorites. I'm not saying old Pokemon can't be in new gens. I'm saying they shouldn't be either the majority or be out here outshining the new Mons, especially since we're in the portion of now where we're getting less new Mons every generation. I think that's been a problem for a bit now, where now we're getting like 50, 60, 70 different new Mons, whereas in other generations, we were getting like 100, 150. We were getting a whole slew of new Pokemon. Now it's like, man, look at these 50 new Mons, and then they're getting overshadowed by every other old Mon from every other generation. And that bothers me. But the fandom didn't care, because all you guys wanted was your Pikachu again. The Pokemon situation's always been the roughest part, because everyone goes, well, what about the gotta catch 'em all moniker? Bro, you can catch them all in the gen, okay? We're not doing this gotta catch them all. This incessant need to have everything in every gen. Also, I think that would fix the problem that people have with having multiple versions. Remember how people keep saying, we don't need 2 versions anymore. We don't need Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet, X and Y, Sun and Moon, right? Well, if you put some of the new Mons in Sun and Moon, and then some of the other Mons in Sword and Shield, and then the rest of them Scarlet and Violet, that makes 3 gens viable, right? Instead of now, what happens is we're just gonna throw all 100 and like 800 to 1,000 Mons into just this pile of one game. So the new Mons become irrelevant unless they're competitively viable, in which case they just still become irrelevant except for the handful that people think are cool, cute, or just really interesting. And I don't know, it just bothers me. The last thing I'll talk about is the designs. A lot of people have had their words and opinions about the designs. I'll be real with you, I don't really see the issue. The only Mons I think were kind of controversial design-wise were probably the Ultra Beasts. And I kind of let that slide because they're Ultra Beasts. They're not even like traditional Mons. They're supposed to be weird and kooky and out of this world because of different dimensions and shit, right? And plus, it's only Sun and Moon, that's it. And it's less, I think there's less than 10 of them. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. But as far as Pokemon is concerned, I think this has probably been their better efforts. Once again, I know we could easily go into the whole animation technical aspect of it, but I'll be real with you, everyone's beaten that particular horse to death and not talked about the rest of the fucking game. So I'm not gonna dwell on it too much. But that is something that is a problem, just not to me the core of the issue. I want the games to be fun and I want to enjoy them. And I think Pokemon needs to drop the stupid gimmick of generation that you don't care about and start building the stuff again. At least that's my opinion.
Killing you dead.
So let's talk about the most interesting, I guess, part of this train wreck of a series, the story. So Pokemon stories have always been important and relevant throughout the games, but obviously as the games got bigger and grander, and especially in the visual department, it means the stories had to kind of change to flow in that same direction. And stories have gone up and down throughout the games. I honestly believe Black and White was probably the best combination of like story and cinematics and smushed together to make a generally great story. But I do want to give some special shout outs to Sun and Moon. Not Ultra Sun and Moon, but Sun and Moon. Because Sun and Moon, although I think suffered as a game because of it, I think the overarching story of Sun and Moon worked relatively well. It had its problems, but it still worked. But the main thing about Pokemon that always irked me is that their stories seem to suffer from this like weird amount of whiplash. Not saying that the older games didn't have this, but I guess it became way more prevalent the further we got into 3D, where we would be doing this fun little adventure, hanging out with your pals and fighting Pokemon that are brain dead easy and trainers that are borderline mentally not all the way there, because I don't think you can say the R word anymore without a video game demonetized. But you're doing all that, and then in the middle of it, oh, by the way, I think I'm going to commit genocide now. Whoa, wait a minute, main villain, sir. Excuse me. What do you mean genocide? It's too late. My evil plan's enacted, and now here comes a crazy cutscene to show the dangerous thing I'm about to do. Now you must defeat me in a Pokemon. Oh, that's right. My Pokemon are weak as shit. I guess it doesn't matter. Or like the weird abusive relationship of Lily's mother. Like Lucamine being borderline psychotic. You got people falling through dimensions and whatnot. Just a bunch of crazy stuff. I always still say, even going past the evil team situation, gym leaders are like the most underutilized characters in the series. A lot of these characters, especially in the later gens, have like other positions. Oh, I'm a photographer. I'm a model. I'm a baker. Like all these, I'm a professional singer. I'm a rock star. Like all these particular side things they also do while also being a gym leader, and none of it's ever explored upon. I feel like this is the part of Pokemon that very much suffers the most, because some games don't care anything about these characters and you get a little bit. Heck, in some games, the rivals don't even matter. They're just vehicles to get you to the end of the game. But in other games, you get some cool development and they actually grow and change as characters, and it's a nice development, although you win every time. You'll always win. You'll always win. And it's never interesting and dynamic, which also is very boring after a certain point. But once I'll give shout out to Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield, I think, had really good characters in the form of Bede and Hop and Marnie. And then we got the Scarlet and Violet, and I'm like, God, Namona, you're so fucking boring. Penny, you're barely in your own plot line. And Arvin, you know what? You actually have a decent plot. I'm gonna leave you alone for right now. But the point is, you're gambling every time we get a new game. Every time. And because the difficulty doesn't match the severity of scenes, when you have to fight Lucamine, or when you have to fight Lysander, or when you have to fight Guzma, or when you have to fight, I can't even think of the main villain from Sword and Shield. That's a problem. It's like, I think it's Chairman Rose, I believe, or even the AI in Scarlet and Violet. The severity doesn't really match the tenacity because, well, these guys aren't hard. And sometimes the story doesn't give enough time to build up. I think Sword and Shield's main villain definitely suffers from that, bro. That man is barely built up the way he's supposed to. Even Lysander really isn't. Lysander gets a couple of scenes in X and Y, and then it's like, oh, by the way, every one of you needs to die because Pokemon deserve this land more than us. You're like a crazier version of Getsus / N. It's such a weird thing. And I'm like, look at all this cool lore with the fathers and the multiple timelines, the Mega Evolution timeline, the normal timeline, and what happened to people like one of the train masters in Hisui or Annabelle or Grimsley or any of these other characters, and you're just like, are we gonna follow up on any of these plot lines? Nah, we're not. Are we gonna flesh this out, give them like maybe some unique side missions that you don't have to play the main game to get, but if you play like the side missions, you'll learn more? Nah. Are we gonna do anything interesting? What about the looker missions you had to do in X and Y? Are we gonna nah. But there was like that cool plot line with the ghost girl, the ghost manic girl going in and blah. And it's like, bro. And I think that's like the overarching issue with a lot of Pokemon's problems when it comes to modern games. A bunch of potential and not a real clear direction how to use it. Also trying to listen to fans, so I'm be real with you, will lead you in the wrong direction every single time. And then act like it's your fault. And you're just like, what in the fuck is going on here? But hopefully that's what the next part will mostly cover, is that side of the coin, that what you can do to fix the situation, because Pokemon is not so far gone that it's unsalvageable, but I feel like there's a lot of changes that need to be made and need to recognize that like Pokemon can be so much better if you embrace your RPG and put a J back in front of it. Because right now, I'm not in the mood to join any of this other shit. We'll see though.